Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the Open Door Show from Property CEO. My name is Ritchie Clapson. I'm one of the co-founders here, and it's good to have you here with us today. As you can see, I'm actually in a conference room. We're about to start a conference tomorrow. We've got about 120 people coming for a planning secrets workshop. Following that, we've got 4 days where I'm going to be running a masterclass, a property development masterclass, all about what you do wrong and how to do things right, and actually taking people through a live project over 4 days. It's all about getting the edge. The Planning Secrets Workshop, particularly that's being held here tomorrow, is all about tips and tricks and how you get the edge on other people. Well, on today's Open Door Show, I thought I would talk about profitability in deals. I was interviewed last week. I was interviewed by a large funder, a large commercial development funder in the UK, very well known. And he asked me a number of questions about the marketplace and all sorts of things. But primarily what I thought I'd focus on today, he asked me a question about profitability of deals. And his question went along the lines of, look, it's very difficult to get deals to stack up. He said, we get a lot of our clients submit applications, which obviously we welcome, but many of those applications just do not stack financially. There's just not sufficient profit in the deal. He went on to say that he said in a number of instances, he said, the problem is we're getting applications in, and by the time we actually calculate the interest, because they didn't include interest, it wipes out profitability. So we have to go back to them and tell them that, well, they forgot the interest and the interest is X. And by the time we take that off, the profitability it's not there. They can't lend on it. He said, what do you think that problem is? Do you think the problem is to do with construction costs, or do you think it's to do with the purchase of the existing buildings? Perhaps if we're looking to do conversions, or is it land? What is it? So I said, look, okay, I think this is simple, because the information that he just gave me, and the information he gave me, and I just summarized it, but there was a few other things that people were putting applications in and they weren't fully thought out applications. I said, if someone's putting an application into you, they think the deal's profitable, but they didn't actually include any interest. Oh, did they forget or did they not know? Well, are they actually, are they in a position, do they actually know what they're doing? And my comment to him is, I said, you know what? I don't think it's got anything to do with construction materials. I don't think it's got anything to do with the cost of those existing buildings. I think it's got everything to do with education and understanding. And what I explained, I said, look, let me talk through this. I said, the first thing is, if I'm a relatively new developer and I'm wanting to get funding off of your organization, okay, so when I was talking to the gentleman there, he's got a big organization, I said, presumably it's good for me if I make an impression with you. When I put my application in, if it comes in well, if it's laid out well, if it's the right sort of quality, you're going to look at me as if, okay, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing, and you're going to be wanting to lend to me. He said, oh, absolutely. That does make a big difference. So I said, if I'm putting in an application and I don't even include interest, and clearly if I'd included the interest, I would have never put the application in because I could have worked out for myself that there was no profit in the deal. Well, surely that doesn't reflect very well upon me. And he said, yeah. Well, he said, but we don't mind. I said, no, of course you don't mind, but actually it's not really getting me in the best position, is it? So I said, the big problem here is about knowledge. It's about knowledge, about education, and it's about knowing what you're doing. And maybe it's also about getting the edge. And he said, do you not think it's to do with the cost of the existing, the existing building or the existing land? And I said, well, first of all, let's discount land, okay? If we want to be a first-time developer, and that's largely what we were talking about. We were talking about applications from first-time developers. He said, okay, what about land then? What's the position on land? I said, well, look, if you're looking to be a first-time developer, I would strongly suggest, and even more strongly than that you don't actually do land development. Not only is the planning system broken, we know the planning system is very difficult. In fact, I was out literally last week, I think it was. Yeah, last week I was presenting at an event in London, and I had someone who was an existing developer in the audience who said, I totally agree with Ritchie. He said, I've got a development, and he said it's a bit of land, and he said I've been in planning 4 years and I still don't have my approval. So why do you want to go down that road? But the other thing is, and this is the point I'm going to make, is land is expensive. There's not many bits of land around, is there? You know, if you wanted to find a bit of land to build your own property or to build anything, there is limited supply of land. Hence, let's just look at a supply and demand business model. Everything is just simple. It's just about business. Oh, okay. So if there's not enough land, well, or there's in short supply, it's going to be expensive, isn't it? Particularly if lots of people are looking for it, then land is going to be expensive. So very difficult. So if you want to go and buy a bit of land and someone says, okay, I want 200,000 for it, and you say, no, okay, it stacks at 150 for me, well, they probably just get 200,000 off someone else. Now, I'm not quite sure why there's a huge demand for people queuing up for land. I think, again, it's probably a lack of educational knowledge or understanding of maybe the alternatives. Because I said in this interview, I said, okay, let's have a look at the alternatives of the permitted development rights. Now, I know a lot of you on our channel here will be very, very familiar with permitted development rights. If you're not, in very simple terms, I'm talking about the conversion of existing empty commercial buildings into residential. I'm talking about maybe banks, maybe shops, maybe offices, like industrials, gymnasiums, doctor surgeries. There's quite an extensive list. All of those have a permitted development right given to us by central government to be converted into residential units. We put an application in, it's called a prior notification, provided we tick half a dozen or so boxes. If our application isn't approved in 56 days, we can carry on. We strongly suggest you get what's called a lawful development certificate, but fundamentally you can carry on. And actually, the reality is most of these applications, if they're submitted well with a really good quality planning consultant, then they're going to go through in 56 days. And the great thing about them is they're not subject to local or national policy. So it means you don't have to, perhaps in some instances, provide amenity or car parking. You might need them to sell. So if you do, then of course you should provide them. But if you don't, as you might not in a lot of city centre apartments, then that means you can get away with it. So permitted development rights are really, really powerful. Now, we go back to this opportunity. We've got land, but the problem with land, as I said last week in this interview, it can unfortunately be overpriced because of supply and demand. Now let's have a look at the permitted development right option. Let's look at this option, which is not only easier in terms of the timescale because we've got this right, not only easier because we're not have to comply with all local and national policy, but it's in abundance. So, you know, where you live, I mean, you know, don't you? There's loads of empty shops, there's loads of empty banks, there's loads of empty light industrial. There's just loads of empty commercial buildings. In fact, the number, if you didn't know this, and you might on our channel be aware of this because I've talked about this quite a bit, is about 1.2 million homes can be built. 1.2 million, that's a huge amount, out of brownfield land. Brownfield land being empty commercial buildings. So there is a huge amount out there. And I think the number is about 17,000 shops closing every year. 17,000. And that's just shops. Of course, there's going to be lots of other buildings which are closing. So that stock is unlikely to run out. Not all of the stock is suitable. I get that. But a significant proportion of that stock, and I believe this is where the 1.2 million comes in, is actually able to be converted to residential. Now, let's have a think about it. 1.2 million homes can be built out of that stock. We are supposed to build 1.5 million homes over the next government's term. This is what Labour have set, which is 300,000 a year. We don't get anywhere near that. We just get nowhere near it. We do about half of that. So it's about 150,000 homes a year, maybe 200 if we're lucky. So what that's actually telling me, so if there's 1.2 million pounds worth of empty stock, not 1.2 million pounds, sorry, 1.2 million homes of empty stock, and we're only doing total, and this includes all the new build stuff that Barratt's, Persimmon, Bellway and all that do, let's say 200,000, let's be generous, okay? Well, that stock is not being used up. And because commercial buildings are closing, it's being replenished. So my point is, and I think probably you're ahead of me here, is in terms of supply and demand, there is a huge amount of supply, but the demand is not really there. And I mean, what's another analogy? I don't know. Let's have a think about it. Let's go down to a cake shop, okay? And if you're gonna go there on a Saturday morning, just because I like cakes, okay, you're gonna go down on a Saturday morning to the local cake shop, and there's all the cakes laid out, supply and demand. They're expecting lots of customers. They're not going to do you a discount. If you go there at about 4:45 and they've still got lots of Belgian buns and Chelsea buns and whatever it is you like, all laid out, you're going to get a deal, aren't you? Because supply and demand, no one now wants them. They're not open Sunday. They're going to go off. They're going to get thrown away. They're going to do a deal. Hey, a cake analogy in a property thing. That's not bad, is it? That's not bad. Don't tell my wife. Anyway, I've got to be off the cakes. I'm supposed to be laying off the cakes a little bit. And I am. I'm just using it as an analogy. So come back to our supply and demand. Okay. Now, all these empty commercial buildings, landlords will own these, commercial landlords. Some of them are not going to be motivated. Some of them will be sat there with an empty commercial building, probably no mortgage on it, but they are going to be paying some rates, maybe a bit of insurance, maybe some service standing charges. But maybe it's a small part of a large portfolio. Are they worried? Perhaps they're not. Perhaps they're not that worried. Perhaps they're not that stressed. They want 500,000 for their building. That's what they want. They're not going to reduce it. But have a think about this. As another example, I went down the road with my wife in a local town near me. 7 shops, 7 empty shop units, ground first, second, I can't remember what they were, all in a row. And that's what stood out for me, because they were all in a row. And I said to my wife, I said, do you think anytime soon someone's going to come and offer to rent one of those or buy one of those? They're not, are they? Who? And it's not a bad town. Who's going to come and rent one of those? And what we talked about, and this is the point, out of those 7, I'm sure 1 or 2 of those are feeling some pain. I'm sure 1 or 2 of those landlords are in a position where perhaps they bought that with expectation to let it well. And maybe they did to start with, but they probably perhaps maybe got a commercial mortgage on it. They're, of course, still paying their rates. They're, of course, still paying their service charges. They're, of course, still probably paying some insurance. Maybe they're feeling a bit of a pain. Maybe their portfolio is not that big. So this particular property is causing them some real issues. So what if you went up and knocked on the door and offered to buy it? And maybe it is worth 500,000, but actually you offer them 400 or 425 or 450 or whatever the number is. At some point, you are going to find that motivated landlord that's willing to sell. And of course, it's a win-win. I mean, I don't say, go and have one over on the landlord and drive them into the ground. No, not at all. Because I don't think the world works like that. I think if you treat people fairly, I think the world treats you fairly back. But it's a win-win. If that landlord sat there, and there's no, in terms of these 7 shops, as my example, there's no retail company, Tesco or Clinton's Cards or I don't know what, Next or whoever, I don't know, whatever. No one's going to be Greg's. Hey, lots of Greg's around it. Greg's might, you never know. But no, there was a Greg's down the road, so they won't want another one. No one's going to go there and try and rent or buy that shop. So you're solving their problem. They've got this pain, they've got this headache of actually the commercial mortgage, perhaps, as I say, 1 or 2 of them. And of course, you're going to turn up and offer to buy. Yes, it might be reduced, but maybe it's more than what they paid for it. Maybe they've held it for 5 or 6 years, 10 years, who knows? So they've made a profit on it, and maybe they're willing to cash in and get out. So your job is to find that 1, maybe 2 motivated landlords, motivated sellers. That's what we want, isn't it? We want to look for a motivated seller, and we help them, they help us. It's a win-win. And so going back to this point about supply and demand, and going back to this point that I was asked in the interview about, do deals stack up? Is the existing land or buildings too expensive? Well, not if you shop around. They just cannot be too expensive. There just must be, amongst these 1.2 million empty commercial buildings to have the homes in them, or 1.2 million homes, should I say, not 1.2 million commercial buildings, but they're going to be a lot, okay? There's going to be many, many, many motivated landlords amongst them. And so you just got to go out there. Some of them are going to be sat there, and of course, they're going to be asking for a lot of money. Some of them are going to be demanding a lot of money. Some of them might even convert them themselves, which is great. Good luck to them. So, coming back to supply and demand, there's not enough developers out there wanting to buy these empty commercial buildings, whether they be banks, shops, light industrial, doctors' clinics, whatever. So, actually, the price has to adjust to reflect it. And the asking price, I mean, I can tell you, many good commercial agent will say to me, forget the asking price. Just tell us what it's worth to you. And this is interesting, actually. And I think I mentioned this on this interview. This is so common. A lot of people go, oh, no, it's too expensive. Oh, look at that. They want 500,000. Many a time have I gone back in my career to a commercial agent and said, hey, look, you got out for 500. To me, 400 max. And because you've got a relationship with the agent might say to you, yeah, look, Rich, I agree with you. I don't even think it's worth 400. I think you're quite generous. But look, the landlord wanted to put it up for that. He said, try it. Can you give me some work-ins? Give me some justification. Are you ready to move quite quick? Let me see if I can get you a deal. And sometimes I have. I've got a deal. So actually the ticket price, the asking price, the screen price, don't worry about it. And so the first thing in terms of getting profitability into deals, which was the question I was asked, get involved in permitted development right. Look for that stock. Look for those motivated landlords and don't give up until you find them because they're out there. They're out there. Okay. Now, the other thing then we talked about construction materials. And I said, okay, we've had some ups and downs of construction materials. Generally, most cost consultants tell me that more or less overall, they're on the way down, if not leveling off. But we know the situation, doesn't it? Once something goes up, it goes up fast and it comes down slow. It's like petrol prices, isn't it? They go up fast and then they come down slow. So building materials and labor is equaling out a little bit. But again, it's supply and demand. Now, it will go back up if we have a boom. So if labor are clever enough to regenerate the housing industry, then the big house builders start building, materials are in demand, labor's in demand, and again, the whole supply and demand equation comes back in and prices might go up a little bit. But it's about when you lock that price in. And of course, if you're concerned that the market's going to move in terms of labor and material prices, and they're always flexing. If you've been in this industry a long time, you see these always flexing. Then you got to build a little bit more in terms of reducing the raw stock, the building you're going to buy, the existing building. So if it's stacked at 400, but you're worried the market go up, well, then maybe you're going to offer 380, maybe 350, and find the landlord that would do 350. Do you get my point? You've got to build that in. This is what we do. This is what we do. Then the other point, and this is a really interesting one. And I guess in lots of ways, it reflects of why I'm here. You can't see the screen at the front because it's focusing on me. Planning Secrets Workshop. Well, that's just one thing where you get the edge. So tomorrow in this room, 120 people are going to be served up. Lots of tips and tricks, lots of loopholes, lots of ways that they can do things that perhaps others do not know. The room's sold out. This event we run twice a year. It sells out all the time. Tickets are gone. In fact, I'm stood right at the back of the room and there's chairs right up behind me. We're absolute capacity. Hotel said we can't get any more in this room. And we like using this hotel. We always use the same hotel, so we stick it. And 120 is enough in a room for everyone to get involved and get something out of it. But this day tomorrow is going to be all about walking away from here and knowing how to do things that other people don't know. So what does that do? What does that do? It gives you the edge. So when we're looking at trying to stack up a deal, when we're looking at an existing building from our high streets, maybe a shop or an office or a light industrial, and many other people will dismiss it because they think, oh, no, I don't think they might even know about permitted development rights, but they don't know the tips or tricks. They might think, I'm not sure that works. Yeah, I'm not sure that works. I'm not sure how we can do that. Well, there's a great saying. Colin Smith is our planning consultant here tomorrow. He has a saying called daisy chaining. You'll see him here on an Open Door series. I'm sure you've listened to some of his. And he has this ability to link permitted development rights together. Well, the ability's there. He's just found this ability and worked out. And that's really what his task is. His remit in life to himself is to find the ways to do things that other people do not know. So what he's going to enable 120 people to do tomorrow is to go away and start looking at deals differently. Start looking at deals slightly more adventurous, looking at deals that perhaps they would have dismissed, looking at deals where maybe they can offer more money for that existing building, or maybe looking at deals where they can get more profitability into the scheme. So that's another thing that I talked about last week with this funder. Knowing the tips and tricks around planning and permitted development rights is going to give you the edge. And then the other thing I talked about the layouts, the block planning. Okay, we call it. We teach all of our students. In fact, the 4-day masterclass coming up after the Planning Secrets workshop, which I'm going to be running for 4 days personally, is going to involve quite a bit of block planning. And that is the art of working out what you can get into a building. How many flats could I carve this building up into? Now, think about this. We're trying to maximize profitability. Go back to this challenge, this question that was given to me. We want to maximize profitability. So on that basis, can you see that if you're good at laying out a building, if you're good at working out perhaps where you, compared to someone else, could get one extra flat or a 2-bed flat in where someone else could only get, so maybe they could get 5 or 6 1-bedrooms, but you've got 5 1-beds and 1 2-bed. Just because you've altered the corridors, you haven't created any extra space. But what you've not done is you haven't left any dead space on the table. You've utilized as much as you can. And I can tell you many times when we've been in our academy days, our developers clubs with our students, up at the front there, Colin Smith and myself, the project manager, the structural engineer, the architect, sometimes we throw around a deal that someone said they were going to dismiss, and we work out how to get an extra unit in. Just one extra unit, maybe sometimes going up into the loft, maybe ways of opening up the basement that no one had thought of cost effectively. One extra flat can make the difference of a deal working or not working. And in simple terms, that's about sweating the asset, doing more with it than what anyone else can. And so can you see, and this is what I talked about last week, is it's about knowing what to do. My concern was that the many people that were putting applications into this funder just weren't educated. And we have to be educated. Now, I would say it, wouldn't I? Because I'm a founder of a property training company. But actually, I retired 14 years ago. I do this because I want to do this. This is my retirement gig. I get a kick out of helping people be successful and do their own developments. I don't think it's weird. I love it. I love seeing people be successful. But that's it. You have to get educated. I have very highly educated people realizing that this is a new area. This is a new business for them. So they have to get educated, and they jump in and they absorb it and they go for it. And of course, I think really, if you're not educated, clearly you're not going to better work out how to maximize profitability. And what a lot of those people will be doing to that funder, they'll just be going along and they'll be looking at opportunities. They just don't have enough knowledge to work out what to do with it. They put an application in, and really, it's almost naively have not even thought about the interest. Don't even bother putting it in. But what they're going to do, and it's a shame and it's sad, and I don't want people to do this because we need people, we need you to come and develop, is they give up. They will. They'll have a year or 18 months at it, and I've put so many applications in. There's just no deals out there. They just do not stack up. And do I hear that a lot? Of course I do. If I'm ever at an exhibition or something, speaking or at an event, a lot of people say, I've tried that property development. It doesn't work. Nothing stacks up. No deals stack up these days. Because you don't know what you're doing, perhaps. A bit harsh. I know. Look, it's not harsh. It's the truth. It's the truth quite often. Because there's people out there developing. There's people out there developing. And I get it in the room. I do get it with my students. So I understand, because we're entrepreneurs and we're difficult to educate, aren't we, as entrepreneurs? We're difficult to take things on. And I can have a room like this where I've got my developers club day, and then over that side of the room, I've got students who've got 5 or 6 deals going and they've got £1 million profit coming their way. And over this side, they're going, I can't find any deals. I say, speak to each other. Go and have a chat. I've told you how to do it, but go and find from this side of the room to that side of the room, what they're doing. And the reality is they've just got to do what I tell them to do. And I've often got that from students that's come in and go, look, I struggled for 5 or 6 months. And then I went back to the education and I realized, Richie, I just do now what you tell me to do. And it works. This stuff works. So to summarize, okay, can you get property deals to stack? Yes, of course you can. It's about supply and demand. Understand business. Understand the basic metrics of supply and demand. Then you'll start to realize that perhaps looking at permitted development right, which of course is less risky anyway, will give you that opportunity to buy some stock from motivated sellers at the right price. Add to that maybe some tips and tricks that you could learn. Maybe get yourself next year, probably March, on our next Planning Secrets workshop event. Look out for it. Learn those tips and tricks. And then learn how to sweat the asset, the block planning, the layouts. If you can do more to the building than anyone else, you can bake in, you can dial in more profit than anyone else. That's all it's about. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. All stem from a question that I was asked: do deals stack up? Can we get profitability out of them? Of course we can. Hey, look, if you're brand new to property, hopefully you've liked the Open Door Show here today. If you have, please like and subscribe for future editions that come out from not only myself, but the rest of my colleagues. But equally, click on the link below, please. There's a link below that will come up, which will give you a bit of free training. Come and join me for some free training. If you're completely new to Property CEO, if you're completely new to development, click on the link. Watch a bit of training, perhaps see if this property development journey is for you, perhaps see if we can help educate and teach you something maybe you didn't know, and maybe we could get you to turning in those profitable deals. Thanks for listening. See you all soon.